For today's In Focus, we travel to North Wales to examine a fascinating site, familiar to my childhood and for many a truly surprising achievement, the Great Orme. The Orme itself is a giant geological formation, the remains of a prehistoric coral reef. But it is not the geology, rather a network of mines which impress archaeologists visiting the site. The Great Orme lies close to the charming Victorian seaside town of Llandudno. Llandudno is rightly famous for its seafront and promenade, which did not go the same way as so many other seaside towns, filling up with arcades. It's also famous for hosting political party conferences, but don't hold that against the place. It is to the west of the seafront, to the left if you're sitting on a bench eating an ice cream, that the Great Orme sits, jutting out into the sea. For many it gives the impression of timeless stability. Indeed, for the Vikings it was such an impressive sight that it reminded them of an immovable sea monster. As if when sailing the North Wales coast, a giant water dragon was suddenly in their way. The word Orme is not Welsh. It comes from the Old Norse word referring to a sea monster, and in turn is very similar to the Old English word referring to a monster, a worm. Indeed, on some maps, the Orme is called the Great Orme's Head, a monster's head. As impressive as this landmark is, however, we are really here because in the 1960s, members of the Shropshire Caving Club gained access to extensive areas of underground tunnels and workings. They explored and surveyed to a depth of 70 metres. They knew that in the 18th and 19th centuries, the Orme had been the site of open-cast mining, and they found evidence of this, including clay pipes, pieces of clothing, and tools. There was renewed interest in the late 1970s, when a local archaeologist, Duncan James, explored further. They went into what was believed to be a Roman shaft, clearing rubble and getting samples for carbon dating. The samples, including wood, charcoal and bone, were dated to around 2000 BC, in the Bronze Age, around the same time Stonehenge was being built. Rumours of ancient mines in the Great Orme had been around since the 19th century, but this was the first solid evidence. In the 1980s, the Great Orme Exploration Society led an extensive excursion mapping and exploring the tunnels. They identified 5 key shafts of interest. There was a shaft called Trewics, Vivian's, Owen's, Pythlai, and also a shaft suspected of being Roman. In Trewics, various artefacts and hints of mining from various periods was found. In the Vivian shaft, a veritable labyrinth of tunnels extended off the shaft from the surface to a depth of around 40 metres. Most of these extended north, connecting to the same areas the later Romans probably worked on. To the south, the tunnels terminated as soon as mineable material ceased. In the Pythlai shaft, there was no evidence of mining until a depth of around 43 metres, and all of this was clearly Victorian in origin. At the Owen shaft, mining had occurred on 5 different levels, ranging from 12 metres to 43 metres deep. Both the Owens and the Vivian shafts, therefore, yielded impressive evidence of Bronze Age mining activities. But what were they mining, I hear you cry? Well, we can begin to answer this question by examining the tools which were recovered. In fact, there's actually a clue for the eagle-eyed amongst you on these tools here. For the most part, such tools were made of bone, for example, domestic cow bone. Also, wild and domestic pig bones make an appearance. There were some sheep and goat bones, but also antler from red and roe deer. In all, around 25,000 pieces of bone and antler were recovered from the mines, for the most part in the surface spoil. Many showed evidence of use, as antler pickaxes, for example, and the state of preservation was remarkable. They were so well preserved we can tell what they were being used to mine. Have you spotted it yet? The green discoloration comes from copper and related minerals such as malachite. In other words, the bones were scraping away at rock, recovering copper ore. This discoloration is present on around 95% of the bones and hints that they were probably used extensively throughout the mining network. In the deeper parts of the mine, it seems stone tools became more useful. Around 2,000 of these were recovered. For the most part, these are minimally modified. So long as you can hold them, you can use them. And they are probably used for crushing and breaking apart chunks of rock to get at the ore. In the Bronze Age, stone tools were still crucial, and it seems many of them were simply picked up off the local beach. What about bronze tools, eh? Well, bronze tools were probably used on site, and there is some small evidence for it, but they're also incredibly valuable. So when the mine closed, the tools went with the workers. It is estimated that for between 500 and 1,000 years, Bronze Age people mined the Great Orme for copper ore. They explored rich seams and extracted literally tons of the stuff. It is estimated enough copper ore was mined at the Great Orme to produce around 2,000 tons of bronze. That's a lot of bronze axes. The total volume of material excavated was around 24,000 square meters. That's approximately 240 London double-decker buses. While the Romans, nearly 2,000 years later, probably renewed operations on the site, the scale of Bronze Age mining would not be matched until the 18th century. But what of the people who risked life and limb and achieved this feat of engineering? Well, there is a clue to the east of the Great Orme at a place called Mold, or Rwythgrig. For it is here that the Mold Gold Cape was discovered, now housed in the British Museum. In 1833, workers quarrying for stone uncovered a remarkable Bronze Age burial. The craftsmanship on the gold cape that the skeleton wore was near unique. This was not a practical piece of clothing. Made of amber beads, gold, and sheet bronze, this was made to show off. It has been suggested that the owner of the cape could only have amassed such material wealth through association with the bronze trade. Was this one of the masters of the Great Orme? If this family had amassed wealth and prestige through the bronze trade, towards the end of the Bronze Age they were destined to see a change in fortunes. You see, there was a crash of sorts. So much bronze was produced, archaeologists find caches of the stuff buried in the ground. It is thought in an attempt to create an artificial scarcity, to get some of the value of this bronze back. Perhaps those at the Great Orme had been too greedy, especially in the face of new and exotic materials and metals, such as iron. Such is, it seems, human nature. Today, the Great Orme in Llandudno boasts a visitor centre, so you too can go and see these mines, and while I may not, due to a touch of claustrophobia, the Great Orme and the mines contained within will always remind me of the great achievements of prehistory.